guys, I'm here today to talk about the 10 books I read in the month of March. Overall, I think March was a pretty decent reading month. There's lots of books I really enjoyed and I think they were all quite different to one another. So usually I talk about books in these wrap-up videos from my least favourite to my most favourite. Today I'm not going to do that because I have spoken about some of these books in a previous video and there's a couple that I intend to talk about more in depth in other videos. And so instead I'm just going to talk about these in little subgroups. So firstly I'm going to run super quickly through the 3 books I completed that are part of the Woman's Prize long list. Firstly we have Bottled Goods by Sophie van Llewyn. I didn't love this one. I thought it was okay and I think a lot of that isn't down to the book not being great, it's just that it's not for me as a reader. This was quite cold and distant. It's told in sort of flash fiction, very short chapters that are following this one character, and I just never really felt a connection, and yeah, it just wasn't for me, so didn't love this one. I also didn't particularly enjoy Circe by Madeline Miller. Perhaps, yeah, I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than Bottled Goods, but it just isn't for me. It's a myth retelling and it's told in the way of a myth, in that it's very episodic. It follows many years across the span of this one not particularly long novel, and I didn't feel like it moved away from the original story enough to like offer anything particularly. I guess I didn't know the original, but I was expecting it to offer more commentary than I got. It just wasn't for me, and I don't think it's a bad book. I just, yeah, didn't particularly enjoy it. And then the one I did really enjoy is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite, and I didn't think I'd love this one because I'd heard lots of people say it was just sort of a thriller without much depth, and I don't enjoy thrillers at all, usually. And so yeah, I went in with sort of low expectations thinking I'd give it a go because it was so short, and I ended up really enjoying it. I think it has a lot of depth, I think it has a lot of social commentary, and it gave me lots to think about across various different themes, so I definitely recommend that one. Next I'm going to go back to the start of the month when I finished Severance by Ling Ma. So I actually read the majority of this book in February and I carried it over to March, and I think I finished it in the first day or two. So if you haven't heard, this is a novel that's set around our time, and it follows a young woman who is a Chinese American living in Manhattan. And it's set in 2 timelines. One timeline is in the build up to this sort of virus sweeping the world and the way people react, particularly following people like our protagonist who don't believe it's going to become a big thing and just sort of carry on with their 9-to-5 office jobs that they really don't care about. And then the other part of the novel is told from the perspective of our protagonist after, you know, nearly everyone in the world is either dead or suffering from this illness, and she's living with this small group of people who are survivors and seem to be immune. This I really enjoyed, and I was quite surprised. So I obviously bought it because I thought I'd enjoy it, but when it arrived I was unsure because the tone is it's satirical, which I don't usually enjoy in novels, and it's also very modern. There's so many brand names mentioned, there's so much modern technology, it's very of its time, and it's of a time that I guessed while enmeshed in, I think a lot of us like to feel that we're above, you know? Loads of us have iPhones and do go on Instagram all the time, but when we read about a character that does that, we like to feel somehow on a higher plane than that. And the protagonist is one of those people. She has this office job she doesn't care about, she plods along, and even when the world seems to be crumbling around her, she keeps going into the office and clocking in and doing her hours, and you're like, why are you doing this? So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was witty, engaging. I genuinely cared about her as a character, and I definitely recommend this one. I think it's a really good contemporary novel that deals with this sort of post-apocalyptic trend that we've had the last few years in novels, but does something new with it, and it's just really fresh. So yeah, I'd recommend this one. Then, right at the start of the month, just after reading Severance, I participated in the Femme Fatale readathon, and I hope to read quite a few books, and I think I only ended up reading 2 books during that week, which sort of fitted the theme of reading fantasy books written by female authors, but I really enjoyed both of them. So the first one is Dreamer's Pool by Juliet Marillier. So this is a Blackthorn and Grimm novel. This is the first book in, I think, a trilogy. I'm pretty sure it's a trilogy. The other 2 books are out now. And I've previously read the first 2 books in the Seven Waters series, and they are by Juliet Marillier, and they're much chunkier books. And they're very, well, they're not very different to these, but they're different to these. So the tone of these is much lighter. You follow these 2 characters called Blackthorn and Grimm, who at the start of the novel are in prison, and they escape from prison very quickly following an incident. And Blackthorn, the female protagonist, is met by a fairy who says, I helped you to escape from prison, and if you do as I say, I think it's for 7 years, then I will, you know, I'll assist you in some way. If you seek revenge on the person who led you to be in prison, then I will, you know, I'll put you straight back there, and, you know, I won't help you anymore. And the bargain is that she has to help anyone who asks. And so Grimm, who's also in the prison, follows her, and they both are sent to this sort of distant monarchy, this small area that's ruled by a prince, and they are, you know, they have to help. They build a little cottage, and they become like the local craftsman and wise woman. And there's a mystery surrounding the prince and his new wife that they have to uncover. And so there's 3 perspectives, one being Blackthorn, one being Grimm, and one being the prince. So you see sort of all sides of this mystery being unravelled. So I really enjoyed this novel, but I will say I preferred the first half, which is much more focused on Blackthorn and Grimm as characters, their escape from prison and their settling into their new life. So it's just much more character focused, lots of dialogue. And whereas the second half, they obviously get involved with all the villagers, and there's a mystery, and I enjoyed the mystery. It was fun, and I wanted a certain outcome, so I was definitely attached to the storyline, but I'm not someone who reads for like loads of plot or mystery. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars, but I definitely prefer Juliet Marillier's style when she's writing, you know, books like the Seven Wars series, which are much more serious, and you're just constantly terrified that, you know, people you love are going to die. So just much more peril and serious stuff going on in those books. So if you've read those and are like, I love Juliet Marillier, but that's a bit heavy, then I think you'll really enjoy Blackthorn and Grimm. So I will definitely carry on with this series. Then I listened to a novella on audiobook, and I really enjoyed it, and it was called Of Sorrow and Such by Angela Slatter. Now I would really like to own a physical copy of this book because it was so beautifully written, and the narrator was excellent, so I think she did a really great job. But I do feel like when a book is really beautifully written, it's nice to read it, you know, in physical form. So I will definitely have to pick this one up, and I will also certainly read more Angela Slatter books. So as I said, I listened to this one right at the start of the month, so and it was short, so like my memory isn't excellent, but this follows a witch who lives in a small village, and people know her as a wise woman, but obviously they don't know she's a witch because this is set in a time period when witches will be killed. And the novel starts with another witch being brought to her to be saved because she's been attacked by a man who has realised that she is a witch. And she manages to save this woman, but in doing so, she sort of gets herself, you know, embroiled in this local plot to uncover the witches. It's a really quiet storyline. She has an adopted daughter who doesn't show any magical abilities, and she's really worried that something's going to happen with her. She also has a dog, and I don't want to spoil anything about the dog, but there's some sort of history to do with the dog, which sounds weird. And it's just a really lovely little book. It's really beautifully written. I really enjoyed her voice. So if you like, I guess it feels like quite traditional fantasy in that, you know, she lives in this little cottage, and it feels very like very traditional fantasy, and that it's very British, and you know, there's blacksmiths and those sorts of things. But I thought it was a really excellent commentary on the persecution of women and how that was shown through the persecution of witches, and I just really enjoyed it. And there were some scenes later on in the novel where I was really worried for her and I really wanted things to work out, and I just thought she was a great character, so I definitely recommend that one. And as I said, I really enjoyed the audiobook, but I would also like to read it in physical form because it was so like lyrical and beautifully written. These next two I'm going to nip through quickly because I'm going to talk about these in more depth in other videos. The first one being At Hawthorn Time by Melissa Harrison. So every other month I am reading a book as part of my Patreon book club. So I give people 2 or 3 books to choose from, they vote, we read it, and at the end of the month I upload a video reviewing this book that will have spoilers, so we can have more of an in-depth discussion. This one for March, so the video will have gone up earlier today, so if you have read this one as part of the book club, or you've just read this one before and you support me on Patreon, then you can go and watch that video. I really enjoyed this one. So I read All Among the Barley by Melissa Harrison last year, thought it was great. I didn't love this one quite as much, but this is an earlier novel, and you know, the usual is for someone to get better with time. This is a very quiet novel. I think some people wouldn't like it because of that, but I really enjoyed it. This follows 4 characters in a contemporary rural setting and their relationships with one another and with the land. And we really get to have a feel for this village and the people who live in it and their sort of lives they lead. You know, we see the sort of jobs they have, and we see what's happening to farmland and how people are having to sort of sell their land to make ends meet. You know, we see conversations in the village pub. I just really enjoyed this, and I will talk about it much more in depth in the video on my Patreon, as I said. And then another one is The Burning by Laura Bates. So I was sent this one and I thought, you know, I'll give it a go, but I wasn't expecting to super enjoy it because it's young adult and I just don't tend to really enjoy young adult books. But I decided to pick this one up one day because I heard that Lauren was reading it and she was really enjoying it, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go. And I raced through it. I think I started it on a Sunday afternoon, and the next day at work I always go for lunch with my friends, and I was like, I'm not going to go for lunch with you today because I want to carry on reading this book. So I was really antisocial, which I don't often do. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this, and I'm going to talk about this in another video because I recently picked up quite a few YA books I'm really excited to read, and I know I'll read this month because they're just so quick for me to get through, so I'll talk about this one there. This is a really new release and it's contemporary. It's about a young girl who moves up to Scotland with her mother because they're running away from something that happened at her previous school that's to do with like shaming and social media and bullying, and you find out more as the novel progresses. And a big part of this novel that I enjoyed is that our main character is doing a history project, and she has decided to focus on the story of a witch who lived many years ago in this village. So that's sort of thread through the novel. Yeah, I'll talk about this loads more, but I really enjoyed this one. I would definitely recommend it. Okay, so only 2 more. So this is The Beautiful Indifference by Sarah Hall. This is the short story collection. I previously read her newest short story collection, which is called Madame Zero. I loved Madame Zero. It's an amazing collection, and I have to say I didn't enjoy this one as much, and I've heard mixed reviews about this one, and I sort of see the reason why. So preface this with saying I think Sarah Hall is an amazing writer. She is incredibly lyrical. She cuts really to the quick of the story. Her characters are really complex. Her prose is just luscious and very dark, so if you don't like stories that go there, then may not be for you. But I think her writing style is glorious and I really love it. However, I think this collection is quite samey. There's perhaps 1 or 2 stories that feel a little bit different to the others, and the rest of them feel like they're following the same middle class white woman who has some sort of story involving sex. And it does get to the point where each of them as separate stories are good, but together they all run into one, and it just becomes a bit disappointing that with all these wonderful words she couldn't come up with like more originality. And I'm all for themed short story collections, I love that, but not when it just feels like someone's doing a revision of the same story again, and it did feel a little bit like that. None of the characters felt different, it just felt like the sex storyline was different, and that was really it. So I still enjoyed this, I'm still glad I read it, and it still reminded me of what an amazing writer Sarah Hall is. But I will say, if you've read this and been really disappointed and thought, oh, you know, I'm not going to give her another go, Madame Zero is so much better, and all the stories I thought were really unique, and it's just an amazing collection. So I'd still definitely go and read that one if you've read this one before and been disappointed. The last one I'm going to talk about I really enjoyed, and I've had loads of people talk about recently, and that's Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I sped through this one, I really enjoyed it, and this was another one, like with The Burning, that I was sent by the publisher, and I was a little bit like, don't know if this is for me, don't really know if I'm bothered. And then for whatever reason one day I just thought, you know what, I actually really want to read that. And I picked it up and I really enjoyed it. It is such a fun book to read. So you've probably heard, but if you haven't, this is set in the 1970s and it follows a band who quite famously ended up breaking up. And this is sort of inspired by Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood Mac, who I found like a newfound love for because I listened to loads of their songs after reading this and during reading this. So how this is set out is it's set out as though it's like contemporary times, and an interviewer is meeting all the original band members and also people who are connected to them, their managers, their friends, all these various people, and recording what they say, and this is the transcript. It just had a great feel to it. I can really imagine this being an excellent sort of mini-series or film. It just really captured a moment, I felt, and it was really fun, super easy to speed through. It's not a perfect book. There's a slight thing that happens at the end which I won't spoil, but you'll know what I mean if you read it. I thought it was unnecessary. I don't think that needed to happen. I really didn't like the sort of male lead, but then I don't know if you're supposed to, so I was fine with that. And I really enjoy something I always love is multiple perspective novels, which I know not everybody loves, but I think it really offers you the chance to see the complexity of people and situations that people get themselves in, because there's never one side to a story, and you could hear about something from your friend or an argument they had with somebody and you could be like, that other person sounds like a complete dick. They're so wrong, you've done nothing wrong. And actually, if you heard from the other person's perspective, not always, but most of the time, you'll realise your friend was also wrong and that person wasn't completely abhorrent, because, you know, people aren't black or white, they're not clear cut, like people are like, you know, completely multifaceted. So by showing again and again throughout the novel all these different scenes and letting you see everyone's perspective, it was just really interesting. And I also enjoyed the sort of feminist commentary running throughout. So the band is all male other than Daisy Jones, who's the lead singer, and the keyboardist. And the keyboardist is a feminist and she's just amazing, and she views things very differently to Daisy. So she always wears like turtlenecks and covers herself up because she doesn't want to be viewed as the sex symbol. And there's lots of commentary about that throughout the novel, whereas Daisy is very much on the other viewpoint of, it's my body, I can do what I want, and I don't make myself into a sex symbol. It's what like the male gaze makes of me, and that's not my problem. And so those conflicting viewpoints were really interesting, particularly of their time, when I think there was a much more of a clash between those two feminist viewpoints. So I just really enjoyed this, and if you just want like a fun, really engaging read, then I definitely pick this one up. So those are all the books I read in March. Let me know if you've read any of them. I'd like to hear your thoughts, and also feel free to let me know down below what book you have recently picked up and sped through, and just, you know, been desperate to get home from work so you could carry on reading. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!